News Talk 94.5 WPTI, 96.7 FM WTOB. You're listening to the Wealth Guardian Show with Doug Ray, helping you retire the job and keep the paycheck. This morning in the studio, you have Brice Payne and Garrett Ray. And today we were talking about never stop asking the question, how do you know when it comes to navigating retirement planning?
How do you know?
Good morning, Brice.
Good morning, Garrett. How do you know it's a good morning?
Hey, if I wake up, it's a good morning.
Very good. Well, good morning to everybody else out there. Thank you for joining us this weekend morning. And we're going to talk about in these both segments, how do you know? Questions around retirement that you might ask yourself and how you might get those answers. Before we get started, of course, Garrett, the Wealth Guardian Service salute. Go ahead and...
Absolutely. So, we want to take a small segment out of the portion of our show to just dedicate to the honor and the memories of those who wear the uniform to serve the Stars and Stripes, and particularly the families out there. We know that it is you that often suffer the most when your loved one is far away, sometimes in not the best of places. Also want to give another shout out to our first responders, paramedics, police officers, highway patrolmen. You know who you are, and keep our community safe. Thank you very much for all that you do.
Thank you indeed. All right. Now, before we get into the topics here, Garrett, we throw a question to each other to better get to know your Wealth Guardian's financial advisor. And this week, we're going to ask ourselves, what is the worst movie you have ever seen that somebody could not pay you enough money to see a second time?
Yeah, you kind of threw this one out there, and there's a few.
Yeah, there's a couple, right?
There's, I remember one that I think actually has a pretty good kind of cult following out there that I just was not a fan of, and I'm probably going to get the title slightly wrong, but you know what I'm talking about. I think it's called like A Space Odyssey 2001 or A Space Odyssey 2000.
Yeah.
Where there's like this like kind of little computer thing that takes over the ship, and it's just, to me it was, Hal takes over the ship. And to me it was just kind of bizarre and just not very entertaining, I guess is the way that I can describe it. I mean,
it's a Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah, I do like sci-fi generally, but sci-fi taken too far and too abstract to me just kind of it misses the mark for me.
Today when that came out, that was the equivalent of Alien.
Oh yeah.
It was horrifying to think that technology could get to that point.
Yeah. In this AI world we live in now.
Well, I'll throw mine out there, and I just saw it. My wife and I just saw it this weekend, and that's why this question came to mind. It's Kinds of Kindness, the new movie that just came out with Emma Stone and Willem Dafoe.
Sure.
Insufferable. And absolutely. Now, it's so avant-garde out there that I'm sure there's some very intelligent people who are saying, Brice, you didn't get it. It is so deep, it is so cool that it's all over your head. Probably so. But a movie's got to speak to me at the level that I'm at. And I don't know what stratosphere that movie was, but it was not on the same plane that I am at. So that was absolutely horrible.
Fair enough.
All right. Yep. So everybody else out there saw it and you liked it. Well, then give me a ring, because I'd like to know what you understood about it that certainly I couldn't comprehend.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started here. Never stop asking, how do you know? So we are retirement specialists at the Wealth Guardians. And so here are some questions that people might be asking as they approach retirement. And we're going to try to hopefully give you some answers on how you might get those questions answered. So the first one is, how do you know how much income you'll need when you retire?
Yeah.
And like a lot of these questions are going to be, Garrett, the answer is by doing the proper math.
Yeah. Doing the proper math and sometimes the painful process of getting there. I think what we run into sometimes, Brice, when we're talking to, a couple or prospective client, they haven't really even thought about it. In this day and age, they just, you can purchase anything with just handing over a plastic card, and then you get whatever goods you're looking to buy. And they don't really think, okay, if I add all of these transactions up over a month, over a year, how much am I actually spending? How much of that is everyday expenditures that I know I'm going to have to rely upon? How much of that is variable, like a special trip or something you may take? Unfortunately, we do have to turn the crank, and we got to do some budgeting, and we have to make some allowances for, a reasonable amount of savings that people like to see inside of the bank. And then when you add all that up, how much of that per year is going to sustain the lifestyle that you've become accustomed to?
That's a key one, right?
And most people, when they talk to us, they say, hey, look, we don't want to live lavishly in retirement, but we want to maintain close to the current standard of living that we enjoy. Okay, what does that mean? And then we start asking second and third level questions to kind of dig in down, get into the meat of it, and understand the cost structure of this family. I think a lot of people get hung up on the investment side of what we do, how the portfolio is allocated and what stock, portion and what amount of bonds and this, that, and the other. A lot of it has to do with understanding the finance of the household. Yes. And so until you can get that kind of bedrock understanding, then all the other stuff can come into play. And so really the question becomes going through that sequence of questions, doing some budgeting, taking a strong look in the mirror and say, okay, how much of my expenditures are necessary? How much is kind of nice to have and variable stuff? And then you can build upon a plan that can last multiple years into the future, assuming with, correcting for inflation and all that, to understand, okay, is this cost structure of this family sustainable, or do we need to make some course corrections and perhaps trim some fat here?
Yeah. It comes down to obligations and discretionary spending. My father taught me that years ago. Mm-hmm. And, when somebody comes in to go through the 4-meeting planning process with us, we give them a list of things that they need to bring in with them.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of thing, Social Security, full retirement age benefits that they're going to have. And I have found, and I'm sure you have as well, Garrett, that when people come in, they know how much money they're making. Uh-huh. They know that. They know how much assets they have, whether it's in their Roth accounts.
Sure.
They know that. Where there might be homework or where they might have to dig in and start doing some investigating is how much do you spend?
Yep.
So there's income, there's assets, and there's expenses. So that's the one that we tend to put blinders on and say, I don't want to really know that answer because it could be scary how much I spend.
Right.
People don't tend to know that. And you're exactly right. When people do come in and they've done their homework ahead of time and they haven't given us their expenses, they oftentimes leave out those annual expenses, car registration, the taxes on the house. Those are not something that you pay every month. That is something that comes up once a year. And then there's something that comes up maybe every couple of years or so, buying a new car.
Yep.
We have to make sure that we are including all of this in, and not just what today's expenses are. We have to think about what our future expenses are going to be too. Is there going to be premiums for long-term care insurance? So we have to figure out all of that. If we can understand all of that, what assumption do we have to make? Inflation.
Right?
We don't know what inflation is going to be, so maybe we use a 100-year average on that. Once we have all that, then the answer to the question, how do you know how much income you'll need when you retire? Then it can become clear.
Yep, absolutely. And then you get, okay, this is how much we need, or how much we need. How we're going to get that becomes a whole nother level of questions that we go through in our process as well. But just to say how much you need, you got to do that budgeting.
You have to.
Yep.
You have to. All right. All right, let's get on to the second one here. By the way, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Wealth Guardian Show with Garrett Ray and Brice Payne. Doug is off this week, but we do want to thank you for joining us. The second question that we want to ask, how do you know when to start taking Social Security benefits?
Yep. So, Social Security, obviously, it's a part of retirement that everyone has. Depending on your situation, it could, be a larger part of retirement than some. But you certainly want to understand, what ability that program is going to provide to your household. So what we often, like to do is go through the mental exercise of saying, how would, assuming we're talking about a couple here, how would they work together as a team to file in the most optimum way to maximize their cumulative lifetime benefits under that program? Right. And so if you've got people who presumably are not exactly the same age, they could file at different times between 62 and age 70. When is the best time for he to file? When's the best time for she to file? And when you combine those two benefits, in the end, if we have a normal life expectancy, it is maximized to its fullest potential. We like to start there and then give people that plan of, okay, if you filed in this way at this age, this would be your maximum possible benefits. And then if life dictates that we need to deviate from that plan, okay, fair enough. But we can at least spell out the strategy of this is how you would do it in the most optimum way. And then we'll talk about, do we have any health concerns that are coming up, or do we have an immediate need for income that maybe we need to address in the plan, that sort of thing. So we always like to start off with the optimum picture and then course correct from there.
Yeah, that's very good. Well said, Garrett. And, I can't tell you how many times somebody comes in and they know what age they want to retire. Mm-hmm. Say it's 67. They have just assumed, for whatever reason, that you file for Social Security at the same time you retire, same day, sometimes even.
Yeah.
And they'll even say, they'll confuse the terminology and say, I'm going to file for retirement. I'm going to start collecting retirement.
I'm going to file for my retirement, Spy. I chuckle at that phrase every day.
Yeah. So there are two different things. And if you have enough money set aside to fund your retirement yourself for a few years, let's say, again, you retire at 67, Social Security grows every year that you don't file for it up until age 70, or around 8% a year.
That's right.
There is no other guaranteed investment of 8% a year. And that's what Social Security is. It's an investment. You are the one who put the money in there. That is a pool of money that has grown. If you take that out, say at 67, the same day that you retire, well, now that 8% growth is gone. It's not happening anymore. Now it's just going to grow with the cost of living adjustment with the 75-year averages, 2.72, I think, something like that. So if you have enough money to fund retirement yourself, that's what we call the gap year. So you retire at 67, but you don't file until 70. All right, if you've got assets put aside, chances are those assets are not guaranteed to grow at 8% a year. So speaking out strictly from a math perspective, which way makes the most sense for you? A lot of times that is going to be waiting until age 70. Now, if you don't have the assets put aside, we get it. There's not necessarily what you have there. But if you do, it is something to consider. It is not necessarily happening at the same exact moment that you retire.
Exactly.
A lot of people get that wrong. All right. Well, we've got to go ahead here and get to the trivia question so that we can get to the break, so that we can then come back and answer some more of these trivia questions, or some more of these how do you know questions. And Garrett, here we go. You're a history buff, so I tend to put these tend to do some of these history questions here. But this is a broad history question. Okay. What age followed the Bronze Age? Was it the Ice Age, the Iron Age, the Stone Age, or the Age of Innocence?
Okay, fair enough.
There we go. So stick around for the answer to that trivia question and see if we stumped Garrett on the other side of this short break. This is Brice Payne. With me is Garrett Ray. The show is The Wealth Guardians, helping you retire the job and keep the paycheck. And this is Newstalk 94.5 WPTI. And this is 96.7 FM WTOB. Newstalk 94.5 WPTI. 96.7 FM WTOB. Welcome back to the Wealth Guardian Show, where we help you retire the job and keep the paycheck. I'm Brice Payne in the Wealth Guardian studio, along with Garrett Ray this morning. In the second segment, we're going to continue our conversation on asking the questions, how do you know? When it comes to retirement, knowing those essential things that you need to know, how do you know those? Now, before we answer the trivia question that we left you and Garrett hanging with at the end of the first segment, I want to ask you this. Are you planning on retiring maybe in the next 10 years? Okay. Have you met with a retirement income certified professional who's also a fiduciary to discuss that? If you have not, I'm going to invite you to take us up on a complimentary review of your current situation. So as certified retirement planning specialists, we're going to put together a customized written plan with strategies for portfolio allocation, income distribution, Social Security filing, and tax efficiency, with the additional benefit of often reducing both the risk and the fees of your current plan. So if you put aside at least $400,000 and you want to take us up on this no-cost, no-obligation review, here's our phone number, 336-391-3409. That's 336-391-3409, or you can visit us at thewealthguardians.com. That's thewealthguardians.com to learn more. Let us show you in black and white how to retire the job and keep the paycheck. Okay, now let's get to that trivia question. Garrett.
Yes, sir.
Very simple one. What age followed the Bronze Age? Was it the Ice Age, the Iron Age, the Stone Age, or the Age of Innocence?
I'm going to have to go with the Iron Age.
There we go.
Yep.
Here it is. Characterized by the types of material being used to make tools at the time, the Stone Age was first in the three-age system of archaeology, followed by the Bronze Age, and then the Iron Age. In Hollywood, though, Ice Age was followed by Ice Age, the Meltdown, Ice Age, all those movies. Yeah.
There we go.
I'm trying to be a little funny there. All right. So now let's get back to these how do you know. In the first segment, we talked about how do you know when you'll have, how much income you'll need when you retire. How do you know when to start taking Social Security? So in this one, let's go ahead and move to the next one now. How do you know how much money you should have in your savings account?
Yep.
That's something that people's answers vary widely on. So there's a benefit to keeping a lot of money in your savings accounts, meaning not invested, but just, FDIC accounts.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some cons to doing that as well. So
sure.
Let's talk about the pros first. What are some of the pros of keeping money in a savings account?
Yeah, so it's good to always have, that kind of emergency fund, have that liquidity, cash on hand, so to speak, or close to on hand. And for some people, it is just a general peace of mind to have a certain amount. Typically when we talk to folks, we typically find folks fall into like one or two buckets. Some folks I talk to, they have a very specific dollar figure in mind. It could be, I want to see at least $20,000 or $30,000 in the bank at all times because it gives me peace of mind. Right. Some people take it, in my opinion, one step further and a little bit more accurately, I would describe it. And they may say something like this, Garrett, I want to see at least 3 to 6 months of living expenses in the bank at all times. So if something happened to me or my wife, we're covered for the next 6 months.
Right.
A better answer. As far as the cons are concerned, there is such things such as, cash drag. You're losing purchasing power due to inflation for any of that money that's just sitting there, particularly if it's just a basic checking or a savings account. If you're in a money market account, it could be a little bit more competitive with inflation, although typically not quite. Those typically lag real inflation. And it's really a kind of a balancing strategy. How much liquidity does the household need? How much covers us for if, that kind of emergency situation that we just talked about? We got to replace an air conditioning unit, or we got to, a sudden breakdown of a car that we've got to turn around, and we don't really feel like liquidating some of our investments to do so. And then couple that with, okay, we've got to fight this thing called inflation. So we need our money growing for us. Typically, the only game in town to do that is by way of investing, whether that's, through the typical way, like through the markets, or it could be real estate for some folks, or a business if you do have your own business. So that's the kind of how I slice and dice, the pros, the cons. We want to make sure that we don't overly weight into cash just out of fear and fear alone. That ties into the risk conversation that we may have here in a little bit. But yeah, so that's how I would address the question. Is that specific number is going to vary household by household, but let's at least know what that number is, so that part of the plan brings you peace of mind and you can feel good upon that cash position, and then we build out from there.
Yeah, there's two things to consider. There's the objective, the logical, the numbers answer. Again, if you're doing, say, 3 to 6 months of expenses, have that in savings. But then there is the subjective, what gives you peace of mind, just as you were saying. So you have to consider both of those. You as an engineer and me as a math person, we tend to think more of the number side of things.
Right.
We can't discount what makes somebody feel comfortable as well. And that's the whole idea that you come to a holistic financial planner in the first place, is to get some peace of mind. So we have to let the to balance that numbers answer with the subjective peace of mind answer as well. And if you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Wealth Gardening Show with Doug Ray. In the studio this morning is Garrett Ray and Brice Payne, and we are coming at you with the questions of how do you know when you are approaching retirement? How do you know this? How do you know that? Now, how do you know, Garrett, when our next seminar is coming up?
Well, you listen to this radio show.
So this radio show, and we do have our next seminar coming up, Taxes and Retirement. We do this one once a year. And right now it's coming up, and it is Tuesday, September 3rd and Thursday, September 8th. I'm sorry. October. Why am I saying September? And it's let me back up and say that all over again. It's Thursday, October 3rd, and Tuesday, October 8th. There we go. Now I said it correctly. If you have an interest in going to see how taxes might change for you in retirement, and I assure you they do, because if you are not retired yet, if you have not filed for Social Security yet, you are familiar with the adjusted gross income, because that is probably just about the only number that is relevant to you when coming to paying taxes. But there's going to be something in retirement once you file for Social Security and once Medicare kicks in called provisional income, which is calculated differently than adjusted gross income, and yes, differently than modified adjusted gross income. You need to know what that is, and you need to know how that is going to impact you in retirement. That is not just the only tax scenario that changes once you retire. There's a lot of them, and we go over all of these things and how you prepare yourself for taxes, how you might be able to legally shelter yourself from as much of these taxes as possible. It is not something you can do overnight the day that you retire. You have to prepare for this, and there are things that you can do to structure your accounts to get ready for this. And I'll ask everybody out there, do you believe that taxes are going to go up in the future? I just heard that sound that you just heard was everybody in the Triad area raising their hand. Yes, everybody kind of understands that taxes are going to have to go up at some point, right? Then if they are, you want to prepare for that. What can you do so that those tax increases inevitably coming in the future have as minimal impact on you? So again, our taxes and retirement seminar, Thursday, October 3rd and Tuesday, October 8th at our location in Clemens, North Carolina. Give us a call, 336-391-3409 to register. You can also register at our website, going to thewealthguardians.com and clicking on the events tab. There is no cost. There is no obligation to attend, but you do have to register so that we've got a seat reserved for you. Again, 336-391-3409. Okay, Garrett, I think we got time for one last one here. How do you know? So when you're approaching retirement, the question you might be asking yourself is, how do you know if an advisor is a good fit for you or not?
Yeah.
I like this question.
I like this question too. I'd say that, fit means a lot. You can have a great, financial plan in place, but if the advisor is not, you can't get in touch with him or her, and that person has not explained their plan to you in an adequate manner, then how are you supposed to have confidence in it? And so
exactly, well put.
Yeah. So things that we look for and pride ourselves on is upfront, honest communication. Willing to go through some of those hard questions that every family asks themselves as they prepare for retirement. And a good financial planner is going to tell you what you need to hear, not necessarily what you want to hear. And it's an honest conversation. It should go both ways, and that's something that we absolutely believe in. I like that. Has your financial planner talked to you about, have they had that risk conversation? Do you as an individual or perhaps a couple understand what your own risk tolerance is? And is that advisor listening to you and acting on their financial plan, making sure that it's within your risk bounds, as I would say?
Yes.
As you go through, or is there, frequent communication? If you reach out, are they getting back to you within at least a business day? Perhaps two, if they're really busy, making sure that, you've got tabs on what that planner is doing for you. The fit is everything. And, that's something that we definitely take pride at here at the Wealth Guardians and Ray Financial. And I would encourage those who are looking around for a financial planner to make sure that they do feel like it's a good fit and really hone in on that communication. That's going to be the winner.
There's some easy ones like they return my calls. They answer my questions. They reach out for annual reviews. They listen to me. More importantly, they hear me. They're knowledgeable. But something that I would say is important is a lot of people out there don't know some of the questions that they should ask.
Sure.
But as a holistic financial planner, we know what those questions are. And even if the person isn't asking them, we're going to bring that topic up anyway. And I know a lot of people can come in, go through the planning process with us, and we're talking to them about distribution strategies. It's not about the investment strategy. It's not about Social Security. It's not about long-term care insurance. It's about distribution strategies in the future. Yep. Why is that important? Because if you take distributions from the wrong accounts in the wrong years, you could be setting yourself up for paying Uncle Sam a lot more in taxes than you needed to. And we'll bring that up. We'll go over what the strategy in broad terms is going to look like moving ahead. And I'll ask them, has your current advisor ever talked to you about this?
Right.
And they say, no. Okay. No, that advisor is going to say, well, you never asked about it. Okay.
Yeah.
Valid point, I guess. But we are the ones that are in that chair that are supposed to lead that conversation. We're not going to wait for our client to ask us that question because that client might never have even thought to ask that question. Yeah. That's on us, in our view here at the Wealth Guardians, to bring up those topics. Just because you don't know what questions you're supposed to ask, we're going to help you ask them and understand why it's important to ask them and get you the answers to those. That, to me, makes up the listening and the hearing and proactively asking the right questions so that the client doesn't have to think of the questions themselves.
The way I like to think of it, Brice, is, our title says financial planner, but I like to consider ourselves financial educators. That's really the main, name of the game here is that, it's, if you go through a meeting with us and you've got questions, hopefully you're walking out with informed and accurate answers that you can take and feel confident in, tying back to that peace of mind. So financial educator for sure.
There you go. And I want to thank everyone out there for letting us educate you just for a few minutes of your weekend. Thank you for joining us. That's all the time we have this week. We do hope the rest of your weekend is everything you want it to be. This is Brice Payne, along with Garrett Ray, the show's The Wealth Guardians, helping you retire the job and keep the paycheck. And I want to remind you, sound financial plans do not create themselves. This is News Talk 94.5 WPTI. This is 96.7 FM WTOB.